What he didn't know was that she was my niece, carefully planted to expose his true nature and take everything he'd built using my family's money. I watched him lose it all, piece by piece, while he thought I was devastated over our divorce. I sat quietly at Cirque, watching Robert lavish attention on Jessica, his 25-year-old assistant, while I picked at my barely touched salmon. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow across our corner table, usually reserved for Manhattan's elite, a table my family had held rights to for 3 generations. My husband of 15 years couldn't be more obvious with his wandering eyes and lingering touches, even though I sat right across from them at what was supposed to be a business dinner. The irony of the situation would have been painful if I hadn't orchestrated every moment of it. "Darling, Jessica has some excellent ideas for restructuring the Morgan account," Robert announced, barely glancing in my direction as he swirled his 30-year-old scotch, a bottle from my father's private collection. "She really understands the modern market. Fresh perspective, you know? The kind of thinking we need to move forward in today's world." Jessica smiled demurely, playing her part perfectly. Her struggling model backstory had hooked him exactly as we'd planned, right down to the strategic mentions of her student debt and dreams of breaking into high fashion. Her carefully curated Instagram account, showing her in knockoff designer wear and aspiring model photo shoots, had been the perfect bait. If only he knew that the designer bag he'd gifted her last week, thinking he was her first real taste of luxury, was actually her 5th Birkin, or that the Morgan account he was so eagerly handing over had been my family's business relationship for 3 generations. "How fascinating," I murmured, raising my wine glass to hide my slight smile. In less than a month, Robert would leave me for this younger woman, thinking he was breaking my heart. In 3 months, he would propose to her, with the family diamonds he thought were his to give. And in 6 months, he would discover that everything he thought he owned, from his car to his company, had been built with my family's money and connections, all of which Jessica was carefully positioned to inherit. "Emily, sweetheart, you're being awfully quiet tonight," Robert said, finally acknowledging my presence. His tone carried that condescending concern he'd developed over the past year, ever since I'd accidentally let him discover a rejection letter from a small gallery where I'd supposedly tried to sell my paintings. The letter, like everything else, had been carefully crafted by my team. "Just tired," I replied softly, playing the role of the fading wife perfectly. "You know how my art class takes so much out of me." Robert exchanged a knowing look with Jessica, the kind that spoke volumes about their shared opinion of my hobby. I caught the slight eye roll he thought I missed, the same dismissive gesture I'd been documenting for months through hidden cameras in our penthouse. "Maybe you should head home early," he suggested, his hand brushing Jessica's arm as he reached for the wine bottle. "Jessica and I need to finalize some details about tomorrow's presentation anyway. You wouldn't understand all the business talk." I wouldn't understand. I almost laughed at that. The presentation he was referring to was for a merger I had conceptualized 5 years ago, laid the groundwork for through my family's connections, and carefully fed to him piece by piece until he believed it was his own brilliant idea. "Of course," I said, gathering my understated handbag, the one he thought came from a department store but actually cost more than his car. "Don't stay out too late. You know how the board feels about late-night meetings." The board, another piece of carefully manufactured reality. Robert thought he'd impressed them with his business acumen, never realizing that each member had been handpicked by my family decades ago. Every approval, every praise for his innovative ideas had been orchestrated to build his confidence while documenting his growing inappropriate relationship with his assistant. As I stood to leave, I caught Jessica's subtle wink. My niece was playing her role flawlessly, down to the way she leaned slightly toward Robert, making him feel powerful and desired. We'd spent months perfecting her character, the ambitious young assistant from a modest background, dazzled by Robert's position and desperate to prove herself in the corporate world. Don't forget about the charity gala next week, I reminded them, adjusting my shawl. The Children's Hospital Board is expecting us both to attend. Robert waved dismissively, already turning his attention back to Jessica. Yes, I'll be there. Though perhaps Jessica should come too, to help manage the business connections, of course. Of course, I echoed, turning to leave. As I walked away, I heard him already launching into another self-important monologue about his business genius. Every word was being recorded, every inappropriate touch caught on the restaurant's security. Cameras that, like so much else in our lives, were controlled by my family's security team. I stepped into the waiting car, nodding to James, our driver of 20 years. My driver, really, though Robert thought he came with the company car. As we pulled away from the restaurant, I allowed myself a small smile. The pieces were all in place, the trap perfectly set. Robert had no idea that his world was about to crumble, piece by carefully constructed piece. Everything proceed as planned. Mrs. Carlton? James asked, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. Perfectly, I replied, pulling out my real phone. Not the basic model Robert knew about, but the secure line I used to run our family's true business empire. Tell Catherine to proceed with Phase 2. It's time to let Robert make his move. My story of how Robert entered my life reads like a classic fairy tale. At least, that's how he loves to tell it. The young, ambitious businessman who swept the quiet heiress off her feet. What he doesn't mention is how hard he worked to orchestrate our chance meeting at the Carlton Foundation's annual gala 15 years ago. I settled into my private study in our Park Avenue apartment, the one room Robert never entered because he thought it was just my little art studio. Behind the carefully arranged easels and half-finished paintings, a hidden panel slid open silently, revealing 3 high-resolution monitors and a state-of-the-art security system. On the central screen, I pulled up the file we'd compiled on Robert before he ever walked into that gala. Catherine, bring up the original background check. I spoke into my secure line. My sister, and Jessica's mother, had been my closest confidant throughout this entire operation. Pulling it up now, Emily, she replied as documents filled my screen. Hard to believe it's been 15 years since he first targeted you. Robert Carson, born Robert Caruso in a middle-class New Jersey neighborhood, had changed his name when he moved to Manhattan. He'd carefully crafted his image, the self-made businessman with an MBA from Columbia. What he'd hidden, or thought he'd hidden, was his history. 3 previous relationships with wealthy women, each ending mysteriously after he'd gained access to their resources and connections. Play the gala footage, I instructed, watching as the security video from 15 years ago filled one of my screens. There he was, younger but already polished, making his way through the crowd with practiced charm. He'd done his homework, knew exactly who I was, or rather, who he thought I was. Emily Carlton, the sheltered daughter of banking magnate William Carlton, more interested in art than finance. Remember how he just happened to know everything about Impressionist art? Catherine's voice carried a hint of amusement. Those 3 months he spent studying art history just to approach you. I smiled, remembering his perfectly rehearsed observations about Monet's water lilies. What he hadn't known was that we'd been tracking him since the moment he'd first accessed the Carlton Foundation's donor list. We'd watched him prepare, seen him practice his approach in his small apartment, monitored every move as he positioned himself to accidentally meet me. Pull up the prenup requirements he tried to negotiate, I said, reaching for a glass of Bordeaux, from our family's vineyard, though Robert thought it was from the local wine shop. The document appeared on screen, showing his careful attempts to secure what he thought was a generous settlement. In reality, we'd engineered every clause to protect our assets while appearing to protect his. My father, before he passed, had always said the best trap is one where the prey thinks they're the predator. Jessica sent an update, Catherine interjected. Robert just tried to access his private brokerage account, the one he thinks you don't know about. I pulled up the transaction history. Over the past 5 years, Robert had been skimming money from what he thought were his successful business ventures, hiding it away for his eventual exit strategy. What he didn't realize was that every dollar he'd secretly acquired had been carefully documented and traced. "How much has he set aside?" I asked, though I already knew the exact figure. "Just over 5 million, Catherine replied. "He thinks it's his golden parachute. Should I tell Jessica to move to the next phase?" I thought about the dinner I'd just left, about the way Robert's hand had lingered on Jessica's shoulder, the way he'd dismissed me, just as he'd dismissed the 3 women before me once he thought he'd secured his position. Yes, I decided, pulling up another file. It's time to let him think he's won. Have Jessica mention the Tokyo opportunity tomorrow. The Tokyo opportunity was another carefully crafted piece in our puzzle, a fake business expansion that would require frequent travel, private dinners, and hotel stays, all documented by our security team. Robert wouldn't be able to resist the combination of power, secrecy, and the illusion of control. "Emily," Catherine's voice softened, "are you sure you want to go through with the whole plan? We could just take him down now, expose his past, his financial manipulations." I switched screens to the surveillance footage from our Hamptons house last summer, Robert holding court with his business friends, bragging about how he'd rescued me from my aimless artistic pursuits, how he'd given me purpose by letting me dabble in charity work. "No," I said firmly, "he needs to feel the full weight of his choices, just like the others before me felt it." "Has legal finished reviewing the dissolution documents?" "Everything's ready. Once he makes his move with Jessica, the documents will be filed within hours. The board is prepared to support your immediate assumption of control over all business interests." I stood, walking to the window overlooking Central Park. Somewhere down there, Robert was probably still at Cirque, thinking he was seducing a young, ambitious assistant. Thinking he was building his escape route, never realizing he was actually dismantling everything he thought he'd achieved. "Send me the updated timeline," I requested, returning to my desk. The monitor displayed a detailed flowchart of the next 6 months. Robert's increasing indiscretions, the carefully staged discovery of his affair, the public humiliation he would orchestrate himself thinking he was in control, and finally, the revelation that would bring his carefully constructed world crashing down. "Done," Catherine confirmed. "And Emily? Dad would be proud. He always said you were the best strategist in the family." I closed the hidden panel, restoring my study to its appearance as a simple art studio. Tomorrow, Robert would come home late, reeking of expensive scotch and wearing the faint trace of Jessica's carefully selected perfume. He would find me working on another mediocre painting, playing the role of the oblivious wife perfectly. The best revenge, I murmured, recalling my father's words, is letting them think they're winning, right until the moment they realize they've lost everything. The next few weeks unfolded exactly as planned, each day adding another layer to our carefully constructed web. I sat in my hidden office early one morning, reviewing the overnight surveillance footage from Robert's secret dinner with Jessica at the Four Seasons. "He used the black card again." Catherine's voice came through my secure line, amusement evident in her tone. "Another $12,000 dinner, charged to what he thinks is his private account?" I pulled up the transaction records, adding them to our growing file. Every expense, every extravagant gesture Robert made toward Jessica was being meticulously documented. The black card he thought was his personal line of credit was actually connected directly to our family's monitoring system. "What about the jewelry store visit?" I asked, switching screens to a high-resolution video feed. "Oh, you're going to love this," Catherine chuckled. "He spent 40 minutes selecting a pair of emerald earrings, the ones Jessica casually mentioned. Were her birthstone last week. He even had them wrap it in that signature blue box she's been dropping hints about." The footage showed Robert preening at the counter, clearly pleased with himself as he handed over yet another card from his secret collection. The earrings would join the growing pile of evidence in our vault. Every gift, every receipt, every message carefully preserved. "Has he made the reservation yet?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Our algorithm had flagged his attempt to book the private dining room at Le Bernardin the moment it happened. For next Thursday. He told his secretary he has a critical business dinner that can't be rescheduled. Jessica played it perfectly, mentioned that Le Bernardin was her dream restaurant, but obviously out of her league on her assistant's salary. I smiled, remembering how Jessica had practiced that line, getting the right mix of wistfulness and restraint. My niece had turned out to be an even better actress than we'd anticipated. The security footage showed her perfectly timed blushes, her carefully calculated moments of vulnerability that made Robert feel powerful and magnanimous. "Pull up the office surveillance from yesterday," I instructed, turning to the largest monitor. The footage showed Robert in his corner office, the one he thought he'd earned through his business acumen. Jessica entered right on schedule, wearing the outfit we'd selected, professional enough to maintain appearances, but with subtle details. That would catch Robert's wandering eye. "Watch his reaction when she mentions Tokyo," Catherine directed. I observed as Jessica casually brought up the expansion opportunity we'd fabricated. Robert's body language shifted instantly, leaning forward, eyes focused, his hand unconsciously moving to adjust his tie. Classic predatory behavior. "He's already called his travel agent," Catherine reported. "Booked the presidential suite at the Park Hyatt Tokyo for next month, under his private account, of course. And the board meeting tomorrow? Everything's set. The merger proposal is ready. The one he thinks he developed but actually came from your notes from 5 years ago. Jessica will present the market research, making him look brilliant in front of the board. His ego won't be able to resist." I pulled up another file, the real financial reports that showed exactly how much of Robert's success had been engineered by our family's influence. Every major deal, every brilliant strategy, all carefully fed to him through various channels, making him believe he was a business genius. "What about the foundation accounts?" I asked, thinking of the charity work he'd so often dismissed as my little hobby. "He hasn't even glanced at them in months," Catherine confirmed. "Too busy moving money into his escape fund." "He has no idea that the children's hospital project he keeps bragging about was entirely your initiative." A notification popped up on my screen, Robert's private email account showing new activity. We watched in real time as he composed a message to his lawyer, inquiring about hypothetical scenarios regarding asset division in divorce cases. "Should we let him find the prenup copies?" Catherine asked. "Not yet," I decided, reviewing our timeline. "Let him think he's being clever. For another week. Has Jessica planted the bait about her small inheritance from her grandmother?" "Yesterday. You should have seen his eyes light up when she mentioned being nervous about investing it properly. He's already planning to offer his expertise in managing it." I stood, walking to the hidden safe behind what Robert thought was just another mediocre painting. Inside were the real documents showing our family's ownership of every asset Robert thought he controlled. The apartment, the Hamptons, house, the cars, even his precious corner office. "Move up the timeline on the Tokyo documents," I instructed. "Have them ready for when he takes the bait. And Catherine? Make sure Jessica keeps the receipts from tomorrow's shopping trip. I want every penny he spends trying to impress her documented." Already done. The car service will photograph everything they buy, and the stores have been instructed to provide detailed receipts. He won't be able to hide a single purchase. I closed the safe, restoring my study to its appearance of artistic chaos. Through the window, I could see Robert's car pulling up to the building, right on schedule, returning from another late meeting that our cameras had documented in excruciating detail. "One more thing," I added, hearing his key in the door. "Have legal start preparing the board transition documents. When this all comes down, I want everything ready to strip him of every title, every position, every scrap of power he thinks he's earned. With pleasure, Catherine replied. Want to bet how long it takes him to realize that his young girlfriend is actually his wife's niece, carefully positioned to expose every one of his manipulations? As Robert's footsteps approached, I quickly switched off my secure phone. Time to return to my role as the oblivious wife, working on another painting he would dismiss with that condescending smile. Little did he know, every brushstroke was another thread in the web that would soon ensnare him completely. The catalyst came on a rainy Thursday evening, exactly as we'd orchestrated. I sat in the living room of our Park Avenue apartment, pretending to work on another painting while actually monitoring multiple camera feeds on my hidden tablet. Robert burst through the door at 7:30 p.m. earlier than usual, practically vibrating with barely contained excitement. "Emily, darling, we need to talk," he announced, setting down his briefcase, the one he thought was Hermes, but was actually a high-end replica we'd supplied. His tone carried that false concern I'd heard him rehearse in his office earlier that day, caught perfectly by our surveillance system. "Is everything all right?" I asked, carefully adding a tremor to my voice as I set down my paintbrush. The canvas before me showed another intentionally mediocre attempt at capturing Central Park in spring, the kind of work Robert had grown accustomed to dismissing. "I think we both know things haven't been right for a while," he began, loosening his tie, the one Jessica had given him last week, another documented expense on his secret account. "You're so focused on your art, and I have the company to think about. We've grown apart." I watched him pace the Italian marble floors, noting how his eyes never quite met mine. On my hidden tablet, I could see Catherine and our legal team assembled in our secure office downtown, monitoring everything. In real time. "What are you saying, Robert?" I whispered, letting my hand shake as I reached for my wine glass. The seeds we'd planted were finally bearing fruit. I think we need some time apart," he managed, attempting to look pained. "It's not just about us anymore. The company is entering a crucial phase with the Tokyo expansion. I need to focus on that, and you clearly need space to pursue your interests." My tablet vibrated silently, a message from Catherine. "Tokyo documents deployed. Legal team standing by. Is there—" I paused, allowing my voice to crack slightly. "Is there someone else?" Robert's face performed a complex dance of emotions we'd seen him practice in his office mirror. "Emily, I never meant for this to happen. But yes, I've met someone who really understands the business world, someone who shares my vision and drive." "Jessica?" I breathed, as if the name was being torn from me. In reality, my niece was currently in our downtown office, watching this performance with the rest of our team. "How did you—" Robert started, then quickly recovered. "Yes. Emily, you have to understand. This isn't just about attraction. She has an incredible mind for business. The Tokyo expansion was her idea, did you know that?" I had to suppress a smile. The Tokyo expansion had been outlined in my notes 5 years ago, carefully planted in Jessica's market research for Robert to discover. "What about the Children's Hospital project?" I asked, letting tears well up in my eyes. "The gala next month? You can continue your charity work," he said dismissively, waving a hand. "I'll make sure you're taken care of. The prenup is quite generous, as you know." On my tablet, I could see our legal team already moving to file the carefully prepared documents. The prenup Robert thought protected him had been designed specifically for this moment. "When?" I managed, playing the devastated wife perfectly. "How long has this been going on?" "Emily, please don't make this harder than it needs to be," he sighed, checking his phone, no doubt seeing a message from Jessica we'd timed precisely for this moment. "I'll have my lawyer contact you tomorrow. I think it's best if I stay at the Peninsula tonight." The Peninsula, where we'd already prepared a suite for him, complete with hidden cameras and monitoring systems. Every moment, of his escape was being documented, every action adding to our evidence. What about the foundation? I asked, referring to the charitable organization he thought was just a tax write-off, but was actually the heart of our family's influence. You can keep running your little charity projects, he said, that familiar condescension creeping into his voice. Jessica has some excellent ideas for modernizing the foundation's approach, making it more business-oriented. She understands these things better than... He trailed off, but the implication was clear. On my tablet, I could see Catherine adding his words to our growing file of documented dismissals and planned corporate takeover attempts. I'll have my things sent over tomorrow, he continued, already heading toward the door. And Emily? Try to be discreet about this, for the company's sake. As the door closed behind him, I waited exactly 3 minutes before activating my secure line. Catherine? Everything documented, my sister confirmed. His reservation at the peninsula, the messages to Jessica, his calls to his lawyer. It's all on record. Should we activate Phase 2? I walked to the window, watching Robert's car pull away from the building. In his rush to begin his new life, he hadn't even noticed that his driver, our longtime employee, was documenting every word he muttered about his plans for the company post-divorce. Yes, I decided. Have Jessica start dropping hints about her inheritance. Let's see how quickly he moves to help her invest it once he thinks he's free of me. And Catherine? Make sure the board receives those anonymous concerns about financial irregularities in Robert's private accounts. Already. Done. The audit committee is scheduled to meet next week. Robert won't know what hit him. Robert won't know. I turned back to my intentionally amateurish painting, adding a few more clumsy brushstrokes for good measure. Soon, very soon, Robert would learn the true meaning of artistic misdirection. One more thing, I added, thinking of the cameras we'd installed in his peninsula suite. Make sure Jessica keeps him distracted during tomorrow's board meeting. I don't want him paying too much attention to the new directors being appointed. Don't worry, Catherine chuckled. She's already planned a lengthy lunch to discuss their future together. By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. The day of reckoning arrived exactly 3 weeks after Robert moved out, timed to perfection with our carefully orchestrated plan. I stood in my private office downtown, a space Robert never knew existed, watching multiple screens, track his morning routine at the peninsula. He just ordered the celebration champagne, Catherine reported through my secure line. Vintage Dom Perignon, charged to his corporate card. Let it go through, I instructed, adjusting my Chanel suit, not the understated ones Robert was used to seeing me in, but a power ensemble that cost more than his monthly salary. Let him enjoy his last moment of perceived victory. Today was the day Robert planned to announce his strategic vision for the company's future at the quarterly board meeting. The same meeting where he intended to propose Jessica's promotion to Vice President of International Development, no doubt seeing it as the perfect way to secure both his personal and professional future. Jessica's in position, Catherine confirmed. Legal team is standing by and the board members have all been briefed. The documents? I patted my leather portfolio, hand-stitched Italian, not the department store brands Robert thought I owned. All here, including the complete audit of his private accounts and the documentation of every gift, every dinner, every hotel room he thought we didn't know about. The monitors showed Robert entering the company building, strutting through the lobby like he owned it. The security guards, our security guards, nodded respectfully, adding to his illusion of power. In his hand was a small blue box from Tiffany's, no doubt containing the celebration gift he'd picked out for Jessica. Board members are assembled, Catherine updated. Jessica just texted. He stopped by her office to give her the good news. About the promotion, apparently he's already planning their Tokyo trip for next month. I smiled, thinking of the real Tokyo documents waiting in my portfolio. Is everything ready in the boardroom? Everything. The presentation you prepared is loaded, the evidence files are ready to display, and the corporate security team is standing by. Robert's lawyer tried calling twice this morning, by the way. Seems he finally started looking into the details of that prenup. Too late, I murmured, watching Robert glad hand his way through the executive floor. Much too late. At precisely 10 a.m., I stepped into the private elevator, the one Robert never knew existed, and began my ascent to the boardroom floor. In my ear, Catherine provided a final update. Jessica's walking into the boardroom now. Robert's practically bouncing with confidence. He has no idea you're even in the building. The elevator opened directly into the executive suite's private corridor. Through the glass walls, I could see Robert at the head of the boardroom table, standing to begin his presentation. Jessica sat to his right, playing her part perfectly in a conservative business suit that nonetheless managed to hold Robert's wandering attention. "Ready?" Catherine asked. "Ready." I pushed open the boardroom doors just as Robert was about to speak. The look of confusion on his face as I walked in, power suit, perfect makeup, radiating executive authority, was worth every minute of planning. "Emily?" he stammered. "What are you—" "This is a closed board meeting. Security. Sit down." "Robert," I said calmly, my voice carrying the weight of genuine authority. "Security won't be coming, at least not until I call them." The board members, all handpicked by my family years ago, sat quietly, watching the scene unfold. Jessica's face showed only professional interest, though I caught the slight twitch of a smile at the corner of her mouth. "I don't know what you think you're doing," Robert began, attempting to regain control, "but this is completely inappropriate. We can discuss our personal matters later." "This isn't about our personal matters," I interrupted, taking my seat at the head of the table. His seat. "This is about business. Specifically, your business practices over the last 15 years. I opened my portfolio, removing a thick stack of documents. "Though I suppose some personal matters are relevant, like your relationship with Ms. Jessica Carlton, my niece." The color drained from Robert's face as he turned to stare at Jessica, who was now wearing a smile identical to mine. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Your family. You're an only child." "No, Robert," I corrected, nodding to Catherine, who entered through the side door. "That's just what you were led to believe, like so many other things. Shall we discuss them? Perhaps starting with the Tokyo expansion you're so proud of?" I gestured to the screen behind me, where Catherine had pulled up Robert's presentation, side by side with my original strategy documents from 5 years ago. "Or maybe we should talk about your private accounts," I continued, sliding another document across the table. "The ones you thought we didn't know about? Every dinner, every gift, every hotel room, all paid for with money that was carefully provided for you to hang yourself with." Robert collapsed into his chair, his celebration champagne forgotten as the reality of his situation began to dawn on him. "The board would be particularly interested in your plans for the foundation," I added, bringing up more documents. "The charity work you so often dismissed as my little hobby actually represents the majority of our family's business interests you were planning to restructure to your benefit, I believe." "Emily," he tried, his voice cracking, "I can explain—" "Mr. Carson, or should I say Mr. Caruso?" I interrupted, watching him flinch at his real name. "Save your explanations for the SEC. They're particularly interested in some of your recent trading activities." The next hour in the boardroom unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance, each reveal more devastating than the last. I remained standing at the head of the table, watching Robert shrink further into his chair with each new piece of evidence. "Let's review your employment history, shall we?" I began, nodding to Catherine, who brought up a new set of documents on the screen. 3 wealthy women before me, each relationship ending just after you gained access to their resources. You thought you'd hidden those relationships well, didn't you? Changed your name, fabricated a new background. That's private information," Robert sputtered, looking desperately around the table for support. The board members' faces remained impassive, several taking careful notes. Nothing about you is private, Robert. Not your real birth certificate. From New Jersey. Not your juvenile records that you thought were sealed. And certainly not your carefully constructed plan to marry into my family's wealth. I slid another document across the table, printouts of his browser history from 15 years ago, showing his research into the Carlton family fortune. Your preparation was quite thorough, I continued, pacing slowly around the table. 3 months studying art history just to approach me at that gala, learning about impressionist painters, memorizing wine vintages, practicing your chance encounter in your apartment mirror. We have it all on record. Robert's face had progressed from white to gray. You were watching me? Even then? We've been watching you since the moment you accessed the Carlton Foundation's donor list, Catherine interjected, bringing up more surveillance footage. Every move, every practice session, every calculated step in your little seduction plan. Jessica leaned forward, adding her piece to the performance. The Tokyo expansion you were so proud of? I didn't create that strategy, Uncle Robert. My aunt did, 5 years ago. Just like every other brilliant business move you thought you made. That's impossible, Robert protested weakly. The board approved all my initiatives, my track record. Your track record? I laughed softly. Let's talk about that. With a nod to Catherine, the screens filled with financial records. Every deal you closed, every client you landed, every successful strategy, all carefully orchestrated by our family's influence. We fed you the ideas piece by piece, letting you think you were the brilliant businessman. The board chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Carson, the board has been aware of Mrs. Carlton's position as the true head of this company since its inception. Your role was, shall we say, closely monitored. Robert's head snapped up. What? But you all reported to me? The quarterly reviews, the approvals. A necessary charade, another board member added, to maintain Mrs. Carlton's preferred operational structure. I returned to my seat, watching Robert's world crumble in real time. The prenup you insisted upon? Our lawyers designed it specifically to protect our assets from you, while making you think you were protecting yourself. Would you like to see the real ownership documents for everything you think you control? Catherine distributed thick folders to each board member. The apartment, the Hamptons house, the cars, even your corner office. All Carlton family properties. Your name isn't on a single deed. But my accounts, Robert began, reaching for his phone, are frozen. I finished for him. Every account, including your private ones, especially the ones you thought we didn't know about. The emergency fund you've been building, traced and documented, the offshore accounts, monitored since creation. Even your personal credit cards have been suspended. Robert tried logging into his banking app, his fingers trembling. This is illegal. You can't just... Actually, we can, Catherine interrupted, sliding another document his way. You signed over power of attorney for all your financial dealings when you authorized the Tokyo expansion last week. Another document you didn't bother to read carefully. The merger proposal you were so excited about presenting today, I continued, bringing up the relevant files. Already approved by the board last week. Under my authority, of course. Just like every other major decision that's been made since you joined the company. Jessica stood, moving to stand beside me. Those intimate dinners where you shared corporate secrets, thinking you were impressing a young, ambitious assistant? All recorded. Every inappropriate comment, every promised promotion in exchange for personal favors, documented and time-stamped. And now, I said, nodding to the security team that had quietly entered the room, you have a choice to make. Though I should warn you, your options are rather limited. Robert looked wildly around the room, finally understanding the magnitude of his situation. What do you want? Want? I smiled. The kind of smile my father had taught me, one that didn't reach my eyes. We already have everything we want, Robert. Your resignation has already been accepted by the board. Your access to all company resources has been revoked. The SEC has been notified of certain irregularities in your trading activities. And your personal assets. Well, let's just say you should have read that prenup more carefully. You can't do this to me, he whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. I'm your husband. Ex-husband, I corrected, sliding one final document across the table. The divorce was finalized this morning. Your signature from last week's Tokyo documents provided all the authorization we needed. Amazing what you'll sign when you think you're approving a business expansion. The security team moved to flank Robert as he sat shell-shocked in his former boardroom, but the real dismantling of his world was just beginning. I opened another file on my tablet, watching his face as the screens around the room filled with surveillance footage from the last 3 months. Perhaps we should discuss your plans for the foundation, I suggested, my voice carrying the authority he'd always pretended to have. Specifically, your intentions to redirect charitable funds into private investment opportunities. That caught the attention of several regulatory bodies. Robert straightened in his chair, attempting to salvage what remained of his dignity. Those were legitimate business strategies. I was diversifying the foundation's portfolio. Into your private accounts? Catherine interrupted, bringing up a new set of financial records. Like this transfer from the Children's Hospital Fund to your Cayman Islands account? The one you set up under your original name? The board members leaned forward, examining the documents with practiced scrutiny. These weren't just Carlton family allies anymore. They were witnesses to Robert's downfall. Every transaction, I continued, passing around more documents. Every creative accounting decision. Every dollar you thought you were cleverly hiding. Did you really think our family would let someone like you control actual resources? Someone like me? Robert's voice cracked with indignation. I built this company's international presence, the Morgan account alone. Ah, yes, the Morgan account, I smiled, nodding to Jessica. Would you like to tell him about that, or shall I? Jessica returned my smile, the same smile. The Carlton family smile that Robert was finally recognizing with dawning horror. The Morgans have been family friends for 4 generations, Uncle Robert. That account was never yours to claim, just like everything else you thought you'd achieved. Security footage from the 4 seasons, Catherine announced, bringing up new videos. Every meeting where you shared confidential information, thinking you were impressing a young assistant. The Tokyo investors particularly appreciated learning how you plan to restructure their holdings without their knowledge. Robert lunged for his phone again, but the security team was faster. My lawyer. I need to call my lawyer. Your lawyer was appointed by the Carlton Family Foundation 15 years ago, I informed him. He's been documenting your activities since the day you hired him. In fact, he's waiting outside with the SEC representatives. Shall we invite them in? The color drained from Robert's face as the boardroom doors opened again, revealing a team of serious-looking individuals in federal agency windbreakers. Before they start their questions, I continued, standing to my full height, let me make your situation perfectly clear. Your accounts are frozen. Your positions, both corporate and social, have been terminated. The apartment you're living in at the peninsula, owned by our hotel division. Your personal belongings are being moved to a storage facility as we speak. You can't, Robert started, but I cut him off. The car you arrived in today? Carlton Motors? The credit cards in your wallet? Already canceled. That phone you're so desperate to use? The service was terminated 5 minutes ago. Even your club memberships have been revoked. Amazing how quickly people respond when they learn about certain financial irregularities. Catherine distributed another round of documents to the board members. The audit committee has completed their review. Would you like to explain these discrepancies in the international development budget? The ones that coincide perfectly with your private account deposits? I can explain everything. Robert insisted, but his voice had lost its usual confidence. Emily, surely we can discuss this privately. Consider our history. Our history? I laughed softly. You mean the carefully constructed facade you created? The struggling artist wife you loved to dismiss? The charity work you mocked? Or perhaps you'd like to discuss your plans with my niece, the ones you outlined in detail during those private dinners we recorded? Jessica pulled out her own phone, playing a recording of Robert's voice. Once we restructure the foundation, the old guard won't know what hit them. Emily's too naive to understand real business. Interesting choice of words, I noted, watching. Him flinch. Especially coming from someone who never noticed that every major client, every board member, every significant business contact was connected to my family long before you arrived. The SEC agents had begun setting up their equipment, preparing for a formal interview. Robert's eyes darted between them and the exits, calculating odds that had already been stacked against him. Your options are limited, I informed him. But they do exist. Full cooperation with the federal investigation might help minimize certain criminal charges. Our lawyers have prepared a complete confession for you to sign, admitting to your attempts to defraud the foundation. And if I refuse, Robert's attempt at defiance was undermined by his trembling hands. Then we release everything, Catherine stated simply. Every recording, every document, every piece of evidence showing how you attempted to manipulate your way into our family's resources. Your previous relationships with wealthy women would become public knowledge. Your real background, your changed name, your juvenile records, all of it. The fallout began immediately and spread like wildfire through Manhattan's elite circles. I watched from my restored corner office as Robert was escorted from the building, his designer suit, bought with our money, suddenly looking cheap and ill-fitting against his slumped shoulders. His Centurion card was just declined at the Peninsula, Catherine reported, entering with her ever-present tablet. Apparently, he tried to extend his stay after learning his apartment access had been revoked. The manager enjoyed informing him that the Carlton Hotel Group owns the property. I turned from the window, settling behind my desk. The real one, not the prop desk Robert had used for his power plays. What about his personal effects? Being cataloged and transferred to storage, she confirmed. Though it's interesting how many items he claimed as personal were actually purchased with company funds. The SEC team is particularly interested in his watch collection. My phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. Robert's lawyer just tried accessing the prenup files. I read aloud. Apparently, he's finally discovering some interesting clauses about financial misconduct. Should I show you the security footage from his office? Catherine asked, a slight smile playing at her lips. He tried to access his computer only to find 15 years of carefully documented evidence being uploaded to the SEC's servers. Nodded, and the screens in my office filled with footage of Robert's increasingly desperate attempts to salvage something, anything, from the wreckage of his carefully constructed facade. His social circle is already disintegrating, Catherine continued, pulling up social media feeds. Amazing how quickly people distance themselves when they learn about federal investigations. The country club board is meeting this afternoon to discuss his membership. And his mother? I asked, thinking of the woman who'd so proudly boasted about her son's business acumen at charity events. Currently discovering that her retirement community is owned by a Carlton family subsidiary. She's being allowed to stay, of course. We're not monsters, but her social standing might take a hit when the other residents learn about her son's activities. A notification popped up on my screen, surveillance footage from the street outside. Robert was arguing with his driver, apparently just learning that his car service account had been terminated. His backup plans are failing spectacularly, Catherine noted, reading from her tablet. The offshore accounts he thought were secure? Frozen. The secret apartment he'd leased for Jessica? Owned by our real estate division. Even his gym membership was through a Carlton-owned facility. I pulled up the real estate records we'd been compiling. What about his attempt to secure office space for his new venture? already handled. Every major commercial real estate firm in Manhattan has been quietly advised about potential liability issues. Even his favorite restaurants are suddenly fully booked for the foreseeable future. The phone on my desk, my real business line, lit up with messages from board members and business associates, all eager to distance themselves from Robert while reaffirming their loyalty to the Carlton family. The Morgan account team sent an interesting email, Catherine mentioned, forwarding it to my screen. Apparently, Robert tried to contact them directly, claiming he was still authorized to discuss their portfolio. They're adding their documentation to the SEC file. I reviewed the growing list of charges being compiled against Robert: securities fraud, wire fraud, attempted misappropriation of charitable funds. The evidence we'd gathered over 15 years was overwhelming. His private club locker is being cleared out, Catherine updated, reading new messages. Amazing what people keep in those places. The SEC agents are particularly interested in some handwritten notes about insider trading they found. Through my office windows, I could see life in the financial district continuing as normal, while Robert's world imploded spectacularly. His favorite barista was probably wondering why his corporate card was declined for his morning espresso. His tailor would soon learn that the accounts for his custom suits had been closed. The foundation board is meeting tomorrow, Catherine reminded me. They're ready to formally announce the leadership transition, though in reality, nothing will change except removing Robert's ceremonial title. And the Children's Hospital project? I asked, thinking of the initiative Robert had so often dismissed. Proceeding exactly as you planned. The press release about the new wing goes out next week. Your name will be on the dedication plaque, your real position, not just as a donor's wife. A message from Jessica appeared on my screen. Surveillance photos from the Peninsula lobby. Robert was arguing with the hotel manager, his carefully maintained business persona cracking as he realized just how completely his world had been dismantled. Should we let him keep the watch? Catherine asked, referring to the timepiece Robert thought was his anniversary gift. Or should we inform him it's actually company property? Let him keep it, I decided. A reminder of time passing. Speaking of time, how long until his private club membership is revoked? The committee meets at 4. Catherine checked her schedule. Though he might want to avoid the club anyway, apparently someone leaked details about his attempted manipulation of the foundation's charitable funds. Amazing how quickly Manhattan's elite turn on someone who mishandles charity money. 1 month after Robert's spectacular fall from grace, I sat in my family's private dining room at Cirque, watching Manhattan's social scene adapt to the new reality. Through the restaurant's elegant windows, autumn was painting Central Park, in shades of gold, a fitting backdrop to the golden age of karma unfolding before me. The latest social casualty report, Catherine announced, joining me with her tablet. Robert was just uninvited from the Metropolitan Museum's annual gala. Apparently, his name has been removed from every major charity board in the city. I sipped my wine, from our family's vineyard, the same one Robert had always bragged about discovering, and reviewed the updates. How's he handling the social exile? Not well, Jessica replied, sliding into her seat. He tried to get into the Yale Club yesterday, only to learn his membership had been suspended pending the SEC investigation. The security footage is quite entertaining. He actually tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding. The maitre d' approached our table, bowing slightly. Ms. Carlton, we've adjusted the reservation lists as requested. Mr. Carson's standing. Tables have been released back into rotation. Thank you, Pierre. I nodded, remembering how Robert had always treated the staff with condescending familiarity. Has he attempted to make any reservations recently? 3 times this week, madame. Each time under a different name. We've been regrettably full. Catherine pulled up more updates on her tablet. The ripple effect is spreading beyond Manhattan. His college alumni association is quietly removing him from their successful graduates list. Even his prep school is reconsidering that donor plaque he was so proud of. Speaking of donors, Jessica added, checking her phone, The Children's Hospital Board just voted unanimously to remove his name from the donor wall. They're replacing it with the Carlton Family Foundation's proper acknowledgement. I reviewed the latest surveillance photos. Robert, looking significantly less polished, trying to access his now frozen accounts at various banks across the city. His familiar swagger had been replaced by a desperate energy that turned heads, and not in the way he was used to. His mother called the foundation again, Catherine reported. She's still trying to understand how her brilliant son managed to miss that every aspect of his success was carefully orchestrated by our family. And his attempt to start over? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jessica smiled. Every major firm in the city has been quietly advised about potential liability issues. Even his backup contacts are keeping their distance. Apparently, federal investigations make people nervous. The restaurant hummed with lunch service, Manhattan's elite conducting business as usual, but with a notable absence. Robert's usual corner table, where he'd held court with his supposed power lunches, was now occupied by genuine business leaders who'd known my family for generations. The country club situation is particularly interesting, Catherine noted, bringing up more details. Not only has his membership been revoked, but they're also auditing every business connection he claimed to have facilitated there. Several members are quite upset about some investment advice he provided. His last attempt to access the apartment? I asked, referring to the Park Avenue residence he'd thought was partially his. Tuesday evening, Jessica confirmed. He tried to convince the doorman that there had been a mistake with his access card. Carlos handled it beautifully. So confused about why the former Mr. Carson thought he had rights to a Carlton family property. A notification popped up on Catherine's tablet. More surveillance footage, this time from a midtown hotel where Robert had attempted to secure long-term accommodation. His credit cards are still declined everywhere, she reported. Even his backup cards, the ones he thought we didn't know about. The look on his face when his Centurion card was cut in half at Daniel was apparently quite memorable. The foundation. Audit is complete, Jessica added, passing me a thick folder. Every attempt he made to redirect charitable funds has been documented and reversed. The SEC is particularly interested in his creative accounting regarding the Children's Hospital endowment. I reviewed the social calendar for the upcoming season. Every major event, every gala, every significant gathering where Robert had once proudly strutted. His name had been quietly removed from every guest list, his usual tables reassigned, his social existence effectively erased. The Tokyo partners sent an interesting message, Catherine mentioned. Apparently, Robert tried to contact them directly, claiming he was still authorized to discuss the expansion. They've added their documentation to the growing SEC file. And his attempts to explain himself? I asked, thinking of the increasingly desperate emails he'd been sending to former business associates. Jessica pulled up more surveillance footage. Increasingly incoherent. He tried to convince the Harvard Club's board that it was all a misunderstanding. They were particularly unimpressed by his suggestion that their own legal team hadn't properly vetted the Carlton family's documentation. 3 months after Robert's downfall, the Carlton Foundation offices buzzed with renewed purpose. I stood in my true office, not the modest art studio where I'd once played the role of simple philanthropist, watching our latest initiatives unfold on multiple screens. The Children's Hospital wing is ahead of schedule, Catherine reported, entering with fresh data. Amazing how quickly things progress when funds are properly managed. The new Pediatric Research Center will open next month. And the former executive, suite? I asked, though the construction sounds from the floor below answered my question. Being converted into the Women's Business Initiative headquarters, she confirmed. The irony of transforming Robert's old power base into a mentorship center for female executives isn't lost on anyone. Jessica joined us, carrying architectural plans. The Tokyo expansion is proceeding as originally designed, your design, not Robert's simplified version. The Japanese partners are particularly pleased with the focus on sustainable development. I reviewed the latest foundation reports. Where Robert had seen our charitable work as a tax write-off, we were now showcasing its true potential. Every project he'd dismissed as my little hobby was blossoming into its intended form. The Morgan account transition is complete, Catherine noted, pulling up financial data. They're extremely satisfied with the new management team, particularly the all-female leadership structure. Their portfolio has already shown a 15% improvement. Through my office windows, I could see the transformation of our corporate culture. In real time. Gone was the boys' club atmosphere Robert had fostered. In its place, a professional environment where merit truly mattered. The board approved all your new initiatives, Jessica added, spreading documents across my desk. The scholarship program for women in business, the technology training centers, the microfinance projects. Everything Robert claimed was too soft for serious business. Speaking of serious business, Catherine interjected, the audit of Robert's executive decisions revealed some interesting opportunities. Every deal he delayed or dismissed as women's projects is being reevaluated. The screens displayed our latest metrics. Employee satisfaction up 40%, productivity increased by 35%, and a wave of innovative projects emerging from departments Robert had previously marginalized. The Foundation's new direction is getting attention, Jessica noted, bringing up press coverage. The Financial Times is particularly interested in our integration of social responsibility with business success. They're calling it the Carlton model. I reviewed proposals from our newly empowered project teams. Ideas that Robert would have mockingly relegated to charity work were proving to be both socially impactful and financially sound. The corporate culture shift is remarkable, Catherine observed, showing employee feedback data. Without Robert's toxic influence, people are actually excited to come to work. The mentorship programs are oversubscribed. And our international partners? I asked, thinking of the relationships Robert had tried to maintain through masculine posturing. Thriving under the new management structure, Jessica confirmed. Turns out authentic relationship building works better than golf club deals and cigar lounge negotiations. The transformation extended beyond our immediate organization. Other companies were taking notice, studying our integrated approach to business and social responsibility. The Harvard Business Review wants to do a case study, Catherine mentioned, pulling up the request. They're particularly interested in how we've merged traditional business success with meaningful social impact. I walked to the window, watching the city skyline. In just 3 months, we'd redirected millions from Robert's vanity projects to substantial community initiatives. The Children's Hospital wing was just the beginning. The Foundation's new grant programs are launching next week, Jessica reported. We're focusing on women entrepreneurs, sustainable business practices, and community development. Everything Robert claimed would waste our resources. And the old executive dining room? I asked, though I could see the changes through my window converted into a community meeting space, Catherine confirmed. Local nonprofits can use it for free. The catering budget that Robert spent on impressing his golf buddies now funds a culinary training program for at-risk youth. 6 months after Robert's downfall, I sat in my family's private garden atop the Carlton building, watching the sunset, paint Manhattan's skyline in shades of victory. The evening breeze carried the faint sound of construction from the Children's Hospital wing, a sound far sweeter than Robert's boasting had ever been. The final numbers are in, Catherine announced, joining me with her tablet. Robert's last attempt at legal recourse was dismissed this morning. His appeal to the SEC was denied, and his remaining assets have been frozen pending further investigation. And his current situation? I asked, though the surveillance photos told the story clearly enough. Living in a studio apartment in New Jersey, Jessica replied, settling into a chair beside me. He's working as a junior sales associate at his cousin's car dealership. Quite a change from the penthouse lifestyle he thought he'd secured. The latest reports filled Catherine's screen. Robert's mother had quietly relocated to Florida. His social media presence had dwindled to nothing, and his attempts to rebuild his network had met with polite but firm rejections at every turn. The transformation of the foundation has exceeded all projections, Catherine noted, pulling up our latest data. The Women's Business Initiative has already launched 50 new entrepreneurs. The mentorship program has a waiting list, 300 deep. I reviewed the changes we'd implemented since removing Robert's toxic influence. The children's hospital wing was nearly complete. Our sustainable business practices were being studied by leading universities, and our integrated approach to social responsibility had become a model for other corporations. His last social appearance was particularly telling, Jessica mentioned, bringing up surveillance footage. He tried to attend the Metropolitan Museum Gala as someone's +1. Security recognized him immediately. Apparently, being the subject of a federal investigation makes you memorable. Through the garden's glass walls, I could see our corporate headquarters humming with purposeful activity. The aggressive masculinity of Robert's era had been replaced by genuine collaboration. Ideas flourished where intimidation had once ruled. The Morgan account sent over their yearly review, Catherine added. Their portfolio has grown 40% under the new management structure. Turns out, authentic business relationships work better than golf club deals. I thought about Robert's current reality, the modest apartment, the entry-level job, the complete loss of the power he'd thought was his. Every morning, he woke up to a life stripped of the pretense he'd built using my family's resources. Foundation's new direction has attracted international attention, Jessica noted, showing press coverage. The United Nations wants to use our model for their Women's Empowerment Initiative. Everything Robert dismissed as charity work is reshaping global business practices. The sunset deepened, casting long shadows across Manhattan. Somewhere out there, Robert was probably returning to his studio apartment, no longer driving the luxury car he thought he owned, no longer wearing the designer suits he thought he deserved. His last attempt to explain himself was quite something, Catherine mentioned, pulling up a recent email. He actually tried to claim he'd been working undercover to expose corporate corruption. The SEC agents found it amusing. I stood, walking to the garden's edge, looking out over the city my family had helped build. The Carlton legacy would continue, stronger now without Robert's attempted manipulations. The children's hospital dedication is next week, Jessica reminded me. They want you to give the opening speech, as yourself, not as Robert's ex-wife. No more hiding your true role. The evening lights of Manhattan began to twinkle, each one a star in the constellation of our success. Robert had thought he was building an empire, never realizing he was just a temporary character in a much larger story. His lawyer made one last attempt at negotiation, Catherine added, reading from her tablet. Offered to sign additional NDAs, in exchange for a consulting position at one of our smaller subsidiaries. And? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I sent him the surveillance footage from last year's Christmas party, Jessica smiled. The one where Robert explained to his friends how he was managing his naive wife's family fortune. He withdrew his offer immediately. As night fell over the city, I thought about the true nature of justice, not just in Robert's fall from his stolen grace, but in the positive changes that had bloomed in his absence. The children who would be helped by our hospital wing, the women empowered by our business initiatives, the communities strengthened by our true mission, and by our final update, Catherine said softly. Robert's mother finally asked about returning the family diamonds he gave Jessica during their engagement. I smiled, thinking of the jewelry that had been ours all along. Have them added to the foundation's charity auction. Let them do some real good for once. The city lights sparkled below, each one a reminder of the power of patient justice. Robert had thought he was writing his own story, never realizing he was just a cautionary tale in mine.